2 years ago, when I made the switch to Sony, one of the very first lenses that I purchased was this, the 70 to 200mm f4 G series lenses. So I've decided to do a long-term review of it, because I'm selling it. Now, I do want to stress before we kick this off, I'm not selling this lens because it's a bad lens. Far from it, it's a brilliant lens, as I'm going to explain. It's just it doesn't actually suit my needs. But I figured before I do sell it, it seems justified to kind of pay homage to it with its own review. It's kind of an unwritten rule, if you like, that 70 to 200 lenses are a must-have lens, which is why I'm getting rid of mine. And they are, I mean, to be fair, they are a very versatile lens. When I was shot with Canon, I had a 70 to 200mm f2.8. In fact, I had two of the damn things. I had the IS Mark I and then the IS Mark II. And when I made the switch to Sony, one of the things that I wanted to do was scale back, downsize the kit, if you like. I wanted to go for smaller and lighter lenses that were easier to carry around. And I absolutely loved the Canon IS Mark II 2.8. Brilliant lens. But honestly, I kind of felt that I didn't really need 2.8. Especially given that I was going from the 5D Mark III, which had pretty good high ISO performance, to the A7 III, which has incredible high ISO performance. I figured that the extra stop of ISO performance and the better dynamic range would easily make up for not having that extra stop from the lens. And the f4 is just so much easier to carry around. In fact, generally I don't even have the tripod collar on it. I mean, you can actually buy a 2.8 Sony G Master. You probably already knew that. Again, I just didn't really feel the need to, because I thought for what I need, f4 more than sufficient. Now, unlike the 2.8 lenses, this is a plastic barrel. The underlying chassis is metal. You can feel that there is definitely a fair bit of solidness underneath, but the external is plastic to try and save on weight a little bit, which, to be honest, hasn't bothered me. I mean, to be fair, there's absolutely no marks or scuffs to this barrel whatsoever, so the plastic hasn't bothered it. And the tripod collar's got a foam coating on the inside anyway, so even kind of rotating it on the tripod collar that I never use doesn't really cause it any problems either. So significantly smaller and lighter than a 2.8 lens, and balances quite nicely on an A7 body without the need of any battery grips or anything. It's also significantly cheaper than the 2.8s as well, which again was a big reason why I opted for the f4 rather than the 2.8. A couple of nice features about this lens. It's got the little programmable button that you can set in the camera menu, so you can have it to focus, hold, or whatever. It's actually got three of them. It's got one button on the top, one on the bottom, and then this one on the side, but they're all the one button, if you like. You can't program different ones to do different things. I think it's more so if you're holding the lens kind of sideways or whatever, you can got a choice of which button you press. Be honest, I never actually use them. Don't know why. Can't even remember what I've got them programmed to do. Plenty of selector switches down the side. You've got AF, MF on and off. You've got a focus distance scale, so you've got the full focus distance range, or from 3 meters off to infinity. You've got in-body, you've got optical steady shot, image stabilization in there, and then a mode 1, mode 2, so whether you want it to do all directions or just up and down for when you're panning. Kind of common on telephoto lenses like this. In terms of the optical steady shot, it seems to do a pretty good job. Zoom ring in the middle of the lens, so it's kind of not right up at the front. It's close enough that you can kind of keep everything tucked in nice and close to you and still be able to turn it, which is something I like. Internal zoom as well, so the barrel never gets any longer than this, which is good. Focus ring up at the front. Again, as with all mirrorless lenses, they are fly-by-wire, but this seems to respond pretty well. In terms of the focus as well, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of focus breathing with this lens, which is good. So 200mm is kind of pretty much always 200mm, which is great. And in terms of the autofocus on this, Again, very impressed. I used to own the 100 to 400 G Master, which is a dual linear, one of their flagship lenses, and the autofocus on this isn't really that far off what I remember from that lens. That is, admittedly I don't have that lens anymore, which is why I'm getting rid of this lens, as I'll explain shortly. But yes, the autofocus on this, very fast, very smooth, absolutely silent. It's not faultless by any stretch of the imagination. As you can see from these test shots of Rusty running up and down the garden, these were on the A7 III with the zone autofocus selection and shooting 10 frames a second. So it was really kind of putting it through its paces. And the camera pretty much always kept the box on Rusty. It always tracked him for most of the shots. It did have a few where it lost him entirely. But for the majority of the time, the camera was tracking Rusty. The lens didn't always keep up with him. There were times where it would kind of shift away from him and then pull back. But to be fair, it only ever seemed to drop out for one frame, maybe two at most. But it does, to be fair, do a pretty good job of tracking him. And then in terms of the image quality, obviously for me, autofocus and image quality are really the two big key things, especially when it comes to a lens like this. The image quality, I can't fault. To be fair, I've seen tests of this lens versus the 2.8 G Master, and this actually seems to be slightly sharper than the 2.8. Obviously the 2.8's got the advantage that it goes down to 2.8, but then it's like double the price and double the size and weight as well. But yes, the image quality of this does seem really sharp. Are the out-of-focus renderings as good as the G Master? Not quite. But for me, not enough of a difference to justify double the price and double the size and weight. So to be fair, overall, I think this is an absolutely belting lens. Most people will be more than happy with the f4 rather than going for the 2.8. Unfortunately, that's why I'm selling it, because it's a 70-200. I know, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But like I said, this is nothing against the lens per se, it's just my personal preferences no longer dictate this lens. So when I made the switch from Canon to Sony, I swapped the 70-200 2.8 for this, and I got the Sony 100-400 in place of my big Sigma 120-300mm f2.8. And the 100-400, which I have reviewed in the past and gone on record and said it was a phenomenal lens, but it was also north of a $2,000 lens, and that was a hell of a lot of money for an awful lot of lens, but I just didn't really get that much use out of it. So I figured for the odd occasions where I would want longer than a 200mm focal length, I could just hire a lens if I needed it. But to be fair, I don't really get that much use out of this anymore, because I'm tending to favour the shorter focal lengths, which I've got all covered in primes. And there have been several occasions where I've wanted a long focal length, and I've gone with this as the longest lens that I have, and 200mm just doesn't seem to be bloody long enough anymore. No, I am not selling this to buy back a 100-400, although I was very tempted when Sigma brought out that new 100-400 Sony lens. Instead, I've bought a 150-600mm Sigma contemporary lens instead. Now, FYI, I am going to be doing a review of this lens at some point in the not too distant as well, because obviously it's not a native Sony lens, it's an adapted DSLR lens. So I'm going to be doing a review and discussing the kind of autofocus performance of this, etc. But yeah, back to the 70-200. Like I said, absolutely brilliant lens. Yes, it is pricey relative to like DSLR lenses, but I would not recommend trying to skimp a few quid buying a Canon 70-200 f4 and adapting it onto a Sony body, because you will not get the autofocus performance close to what you get from this. Hell, you'll be lucky if you get any autofocus performance, to be quite honest. So yes, by the time you watch this video, likely I will no longer be the owner of this lens. That will be belonging to someone else, but I genuinely hope that they enjoy using it as much as I've enjoyed using it. I just hope that they use it more than I've managed to use it, because, like I said, unfortunately, it's a brilliant lens. It just doesn't suit my needs anymore. So if you're a Sony shooter and you're in the market for a 70 to 200mm lens, I can definitely recommend the f4, and I don't think you will be disappointed by it. Yes, you could get the 2.8, but for me personally, at twice the size, twice the weight, and twice the price, I don't think it's twice as good. But that's just my thoughts and opinions. What do you reckon? Have you got this lens and how do you find it? Have you got the 2.8? Have you compared the two up and how well do they perform? Let me know your thoughts and comments in the box down below. While you're down there, if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.